We all set?
Yep, good to go.
All right, I'd like to call to order this regularly scheduled Board of Finance meeting scheduled for Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. I'd like to open up with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all. Before we get started, we're waiting for Tara, our first selectman, to join us. She'll be joining us, but we can get started. Also, we have one member not with us tonight, Mr. Tom Davanzo. He has resigned from the Board of Finance, and we will talk about that later under new business. Tara, thank you. You're on now. So we've already gone through the Pledge of Allegiance. How about public comment? Public comment. Yes, do we have anybody here for public comment? All right, hearing none. Brianna?
We just received one communication from Matt Grimes.
Okay, thank you. And then meeting minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of December 8th, 2021.
I'll second.
Do we have any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. We move on. Report of the first selectman. Tara?
Happy New Year, everybody. Sorry, I'm just running a second late. I was down at a Parks and Recs meeting and had to run up the stairs. So what do I have to report? Things are moving along swimmingly. It's my 5th week here in the seat, and obviously there's a pretty big learning curve, but I'm getting through it. And as far as finances are concerned, you all know that the budgets by department are due to me to Marcia and I by Friday. So I look forward to receiving those and giving them a harder look. And I appreciate the work of the committee with Ricky at the helm. That's been really, really informative for me, being new, and just good work all around. So thank you for that.
Okay, we'll talk about the budget schedule later, and we're going to have a little presentation that you could follow along with, Tara, and put in your thoughts, but it's going to follow the previous years, how we've done it, pretty much so. And we can all comment to it and then make it how we want to go, okay?
Super, great, thanks.
All right, anything else you want to add?
Did you see the note? I didn't get to text you back, but I just want to make sure you saw that, Glenn.
We're going to talk about that later too under new business. How's that? We'll discuss it as a group. I mean, I think it's now a document, right? So we can discuss it.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the report of the financial director, and we're going to start with the BOE. Bob, you're online.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much for having me. I sent you all the copy of the monthly report. A couple of things. The last 2 months, we've had things go in our favor in terms of actually increasing our projected underrun. This month, we had a couple of things go the other way. We've had some added expenses in both areas were transportation related. One was on special ed transportation. Situation was we had been sharing a bus, and there became a huge behavioral issue that caused us to have to split the bus and have 2 different transportations, unfortunately, but it happens. And the other was a special bus runs on regular education because of 2 Brookfield residents that were in a shelter. And we had to run a special bus run over to them. It was 5 kids involved. So, but those went in against us. But even with it, we're still projecting about $48,000 budget surplus at this point. So things overall are still working well for us. And we are tracking some special ed items. And because of that, we're being very conservative on other line items and not authorizing spending until we see how those play out. So all things considered, we're kind of in green mode relative to the budget. So I'll entertain any questions.
So the things you're tracking, are they alarming or just sort of concerns at this time? I mean,
They're in
would
the
you,
last page. So one of the things we've done, Glenn, is in the last page of the document I sent you, we've
Mhm.
asked we've asked Mr. Post to show us the items that are emerging items. They're not in his forecast, or if they are in his forecast, he just mentions it. You know, it might be an update from the prior month. In
right,
special ed, we've got one student who's likely to be outplaced, which is about a $60,000 item. It's like the fourth line down there. And then there's some other smaller items that are, they all are kids coming in who are in some sort of mediation or evaluation. I
okay,
talked to the special ed director. We'll know more in February, right? January tends to be a little quiet in terms of finalizing those decisions, but at the beginning of February, that we'll know one way or the other. So I'm expecting at my next report to you, we'll have a really crisp view. We also are monitoring the excess cost grant, which we are expecting, given what we're seeing, that it might come in slightly less than we had budgeted. Which hurts us. But as Ken told us, he says it's very funky what's going on. We haven't been told anything about the rates of reimbursement from the state. So he's actually waiting for the check so we can see how that played out. And if you remember, the state ups and downs their reimbursement rate depending on how much application they got, right? If they got a lot of
Yes.
applicants, they have very few applicants, then they can give out a higher percentage. And then we're doing a piece of work on substitutes. It's not alarming, he said, it's just running a little high. And therefore we're holding on the 3 items listed on the bottom. We're holding on new textbook spend, instructional supplies, and professional development spend until we see how these things play out in February.
okay.
But all things considered, Ken was not in a panic about it.
All right, that's what I was more worried about. Tara, just for your knowledge, as part of the meeting here, is this Board of Finance had agreed for the prior budget with the Board of Ed leadership that, like special ed, we took out the contingencies of special ed. They ran a very lean budget. And if they had students added that were out of their control or out of their foresight, that we would support that through the contingency fund. The process would be they would come to you, ask for a special appropriation to the Board of Selectmen, and then the Board of Finance would support that. That was an agreement we had to try to keep the budget lean and the trust between the boards. So I just, when he's talking about special ed students and we're running a $47,000 surplus now with a $60,000 student, that could flip that surplus to a negative. And we've agreed, because they came in at a very lean special ed budget, that we would support that.
Yeah,
Thank you for that clarification. I remember hearing about that. So thank you for refreshing my memory.
I'll
That's
also,
go ahead.
I'll also add that we also, at the same time we started initiating that process, we agreed that the chairman of the Board of Ed would come to the Board of Finance meetings in case, so to be, make sure it's as transparent as we can be. And we have a member of your Board of Finance on our Board of Ed Finance Committee, and Eileen has been sitting with us through all the budget reviews, which is well underway. We will be meeting next week to review our budget and in time so we can be ready for the submission at the end of the month as required.
Great. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, any questions for Bob?
Just one question while we're all on the phone. We haven't scheduled the 3-board meeting yet, have we? I think we weren't sure who actually schedules that. But maybe that's something we can send out an email and find out a night that works well for everybody. We've done it in the past, and I thought it was a good forum to just kind of get an overview of what the Board of Ed has in mind to present to the town. And so I don't know who should get that ball rolling.
I think in the past, it was always the Board of Ed's meeting to present to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, but Bob?
I'll take the lead. It's fine. It's I'll send to the chairmans of the 2 boards with a possible dates, and we'll go. To be frank, the last 3 years, Steve Dunn organized the meeting, so it's fine. I have no problem, taking the lead on, organizing a date, and then we can each of the boards has to call a meeting on that date. So
Right.
Yes. Carrie, you okay with that?
If Bob agreed to take the lead, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Always my pleasure.
And
All
Bob,
right.
we've said it before, the question and answer narrative that was sent last year was so valuable. You're gonna be able to send that ahead of time?
Absolutely.
That was so good.
And it's as robust this year as it was last year. So we have, I want to say I printed it out and it's like 25 pages so far.
Excellent.
So there's a lot of Q's and A's that went on. And if you haven't had a chance, we've had a good set of presentations on the what's driving the budget in our 2 or 3 last meetings. It's usually there's a section of the agenda that where toward the end, which we're going through the budget and we have comebacks from the superintendent. And there's not a lot of big investments in this budget. It's all roll out from the ARPA funds, right? Things that, or the ARPA funding expired and it now becomes a regular budget item is the biggest driver. And then there's a couple of required things that driven by class size, special ed, and things like that. So it's there's not a lot of discretionary items in the budget. We've tried to keep it as tight as we can, like we have the last couple of years. It's
Right.
It's at like 3.8% right now. And I'll be frank, if the gas and fuel bills were better, it would be much lower than that. So I mean, there's some physics involved here.
Yeah. So not to jump the gun on the presentation, but a question, just to preview a question that I'm going to have is the addition of operating expenses from the ARPA funds and how many, which ones of those were really needed to be added for those and which ones were, I just want to talk about the adding of operating expenses with temporary money.
Yeah, good. It's an excellent question because we've agreed what we're going to have is since it's the big driver, it has to have a whole module in our presentation on what's going on with ARPA, right? So that has to be something we all are expert on.
Great, thank you.
So that's it for me, Glenn.
All right. Then we're on to the next. Marcia, how about you? Revenue and expenditures, please.
All right, I'm going to apologize in advance that I'm a little bit long tonight, that we talked about the board of, and I'm going to try and watch new people coming on at the same time as the host here, that we talked before about the auditors coming in tonight and talking a little bit about the financial statements. They could not make the meeting. So I am going to give you a little overview of the year-end 2021 financial statements and what I think are important numbers that we look at there. First of all, a little bit about the audit, that it was filed on time for the second year in a row after yet 11 years of being late. I will tell you that only 75 of the 169 towns did file it on time this year. That you can find it on the town website. If you go to the home page and click on budgets and reports, there's a link there to the 2021 financial statements. If you're going to do it in Acrobat, that open the bookmarks on the left. Anytime I do something, I try to use the bookmarks to help you navigate a little bit easier. And you want to read management's discussion and analysis. It's a clean opinion, which means the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. Every year I tell you that it is telling you whether you should invest in our bonds or not are the biggest parts of this financial statement. It's not a report card. Although government, sometimes politics starts to think about it as a report card, that if so, we got a good report this year, but there may be times where we have things that we need to work on. That I can't say that everything is perfect. That there's a lot of reports in there. That we have a report on the financial statements. That's the clean opinion. But we also have down here on the financial statements in the back, we have some additional reporting that on our internal controls that they give us negative assurance. Did they find anything in our controls that might be a problem that we would not catch in a timely manner. And they did not find anything. That did we comply with the laws and regulations, the big ones, that they did not find anything that we didn't comply with for laws and regulations. That federal grants, as far as internal controls over following the rules and regulations for federal grants, they didn't find any weaknesses in our internal controls. That did we comply? So one is do we have policies and procedures in place? And then the other one is, did we comply? And they give an opinion that we did comply with laws and regulations over federal grants, and then the same 2 reports over state grants. So if you don't want to read the 10 pages or so of those reports, that's what they're saying. And then there's no findings in the audit, which is great. But again, there may be times where we have findings in the audit that because we haven't gone to perfect. That the bond ratings, I'm trying to keep your attention, so I want to give you some graphs and some charts, and so what we did was I did a pivot chart with the bond ratings. That there's different bond rating companies, so that AA plus is Standards and Poor, AA1 is Moody's. They're the same rating, so I color coded them the same. But you can see of 137 towns that have bond ratings, not everyone gets bond ratings because not the small towns don't go out to bond every year, every few years. Of the 137 towns, 40 have the AAA rating. That's what we have. That's the highest rating. That and then we have 37 that are 1 notch down. We have 28, which are 2 notches down. We have 18, which are a little further. These are the most exciting ones here, that they have bad ratings, that they're into the Bs. That so that's good. We're doing really well with the AAA rating. We may not be able to keep it because we have a lot of debt. That so we want to do everything we can on the other side with policies and procedures and fund balance and stuff to offset the things that we might have that are negatives that we can't help. This is page 24 of the financial statements. This is the balance sheet for, and we call it, I call it a short-term balance sheet. That if you look up here, these are assets, things that are going to turn into cash in the next 60 days after year end. And these are things that are going to use our cash in the next 60 days. So this here would be our cash 60 days out if we stopped being a town as of June 30th. We call it fund balance. You can think of it as working capital. That we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but let's go through. We have different columns on here as well. The general fund, anything that's not required to be in a separate fund or most prudent to be in a separate fund goes to the general fund. That's where we have our budget. That's the one we talk about all the time. We have the bonded capital projects. I'm going to talk a little more about that, labeled with a B, coming up. We have this elementary school construction. Right now, we're looking great in there because we had a big bond and we hadn't spent it all at June 30th. That this is going to change. We spend about $5 million a month. And we put more money in October, but that's what this fund is. The water assessment fund, we have 2 assessments out there and we're working on a 3rd assessment for the Candlewood Lake Road. That's what's showing up here. The ARPA money, we received money in, we haven't earned it yet. So we have no equity or no working capital available to us there. And then all these are other governmental funds. There's a formula to use about what goes on this page and what goes here. Essentially, if it's bigger than 10% of any of these subtotals, it has to go on this page. That But we'll take a look at those a little bit later at C. But let's first look at the general fund. And we're going to look at fund balance down here, that our total fund balance is 11 million. That of that, we have some that's assigned, that's earmarked. It's earmarked by us. If it was earmarked by someone outside, it would be called restricted. If it was earmarked by a town meeting, it would be called committed. But this is a lower level, just earmarked by us. And there's the biggest part of this is our fund balance policy. We said that any revenue that we receive, if we made what you might think of as a profit, that if we had a surplus, that half of it we would put here, and we would say that that's available for appropriations going forward, and half we would tuck into this number and not touch. And that's how we're going to increase our fund balance. And go ahead and ask questions as we go along if you want. When we look at our history of fund balance, first let's talk about fund balance and why it's important. That it does lower increase our bond rating and lowers our interest, because bonding companies see the importance of fund balance. It offsets a lot of risk. That it also helps us with our cash flow. You may not have noticed this, but we've stopped taking out bond anticipation notes. Bond anticipation notes between interest and legal fees cost us about $100,000 a year. So if we reduced our fund balance, we may need to take those out to pay our bills. We may need to take those out to pay our bills as we go along. And so now we've kind of screwed ourselves, and now we've got to add those costs to the budget. And it allows flexibility that if we have something, if we had another storm, huge storm that came up, we would be able to fund it without taking out a loan. That some people talk about using fund balance to offset taxes. That there are times when you could do that if it's a one-time expense, but overall, if you need to increase, let's say you need to increase your mill rate by 2 mills every year, and we're going to use 1 mill of fund balance to offset that. Next year, we're going to have to increase it by 3 mills. So it's really a short-term thing that it's like, I used to liken it to, okay, I'm going to work part-time. I'm going to, relax a little bit and use my savings. All right, when the savings is gone, now I've got to go back to full-time and build that up again. So that's some of the things that we don't always understand about fund balance. So this is our history, and you can see that we have been going up. We usually look at fund balance. This is the way we look at it. There's a percent of budgeted revenue. I'm going to give some comparisons that are calculated slightly different, but for us, this is how we look at it in our fund balance policy, that we want to be at 18, 20%, and we're at 16%. But we also need to look at the others. So here we are looking at us over here. This is our fund balance, and this is looking at as a comparison of the revenues. Where the slide a minute ago was on our budget revenues, these are on our GAAP revenues. So this is a little bit lower. The GAAP revenues are higher because it's got a few $1 million extra revenue in there for the pension that the state pays on our behalf. So these numbers are correct. It's just a little slightly different calculation. So we look at this graph, and the bonding company in our presentation looks at this graph of how do we compare to other AAA towns. And I did pull up each one of their financial statements for the June 30th of 2021. The ones with a little asterisks didn't have it yet, so they're still in an old year. But for 2021, I was hoping that we would move forward because we did such smart decisions in our budgeting and COVID, that we would take over some of these, and because I know some of these towns made some stupid decisions. Some of the ones that made stupid decisions aren't AAA, so it doesn't show here. But you can see that our fund balance percentage is 14.03. That you can see over here of the towns shown that the average is 17.53%. So we're still below average of the AAA communities that with the latest numbers I can get from them. And of all towns in the state, that I thought there was 169 towns, and they show Heartland. When did Heartland become a town? I don't know, but they had 170 towns that, I apologize to Heartland, that of all towns, that the fund balance is 16.94%. And for those of you, probably Dan Dvorak, that think it would be fun to play with these numbers, I can send you the spreadsheet that but again, when we talk about our fund balance being low, we didn't put it really high on our goals. I mean, we put it. It's a huge goal of ours, but we didn't make it so that it was 22%. We put it in an attainable figure. But this is part of why we were seen as having a low fund balance. It's great for us, great from where we've ever been, but not where we need to be yet. So B is the bonded projects that, you could look at each project and on the PDF of the financial statements, again, on the website that you've also received them, page 115 and 116, you can see project by project where we stand on each one. All the money in the bonded fund has to be spent to offset future revenues. We can't say, oh, we came under budget on the school for 2 million. Let's take that and offset, which we haven't come in, but we're looking good on the school construction. Let's take that and offset taxes. We can't do that with the bonded funds. We can take that and offset radios or something else that comes up. But all monies for the bonded project, we account for them every year when we go through the bonding process, that it's a very detailed schedules. It takes hours and hours to give them the information. And that's, it's so detailed because it is tax exempt bonds, and there's a lot of rules around that. But the important point to note on page 116 is that we had $1.6 million of money that was in there that was committed for specific projects. And again, you can see project by project on that page, those pages. And then we did have some funds that came in under budget. There was $736,000 of those funds, and we used those this year to offset other projects that, so we didn't have to take out as many bonds. But it's very important. Look at that schedule there. It's very, very helpful. And then we have the other smaller funds that was on C back when we had the, that's this total here. They're all totaled together. And if we look there, this was what makes up all the other funds that are considered the small funds, non-major funds. And you can look at those starting at page 119. And if they have an asterisk there, that means there's a schedule that supports it. Just like the bond fund, you can see all the details of what's happening in there. So Parks and Rec, that they have a separate fund for their programs coming in and coming out. That the Small Cities Grant Fund, we have loans that are out there on with a Small Cities Grant for economically disadvantaged individuals, that they can use them for housing and other projects. That and it's a revolving loan fund. That Gursky, the Gursky Property Fund, that's we call that fund that, but it's the Conservation Commission Fund. that they have money in there. Some of that is restricted, that we can't spend. The grants that are attached to those properties tells us that. And some of that we could spend. So if we needed to fix up something, or if we lost money on rental, we had 83,000 as of June 30th that we could spend. We have the social services fund. That's the emergency fund that they get donations and grants that go in there, and they use that to help people in need. We have the town grant fund, a little asterisk, so you can go in behind these pages and see exactly what grants are included in here. Those are restricted. The outside tells us everything we have to do with those. We can't divert the money for any other purpose, but you can see grant by grant what's included in there. The education grant fund is the same. The school has the cafeteria fund that is also a grant that tells them what they have to do with that money. Student activity funds, this is the first time you've seen it here, and it's the first time that you've seen the little asterisks that there was a change in the accounting rules, that these were going to be changed from what was called agency funds to custodial funds. But one of the caveats in there says that if the town really has a lot of control over that, that we can't call them custodial funds. We have to call them special revenue type funds. And there are funds that, and because the state has set up that we need a treasurer that's from the town for every one of these funds, the oversight, not replacing John Lucas, but that we need someone overseeing each one of those funds or assigned to those funds, that's enough for these to be considered special revenue funds. And that was a change this year because that new accounting rule went into effect this year. So there's $240,000 in there, and you can go back to the supporting schedule and see exactly what makes up that $240,000. We have a lot of these. We have police have some funds. They have the contract services fund or outside services fund. That's the money that they come to us every once in a while and say, hey, can we spend that on, the big marshmallow or whatever they're going to spend it on. We have, and there's a schedule in the back that shows how that money came in and what they've earmarked it for their special projects and where they stand. We have an asset forfeiture fund that I'm not exactly sure on this, but I think if you have drugs in your house and they collect some money or something, they allocate these out, we get some of it. There's rules on what we can spend it for, that mostly for fighting drugs and organized crime. So we have that money, and again, schedule in the back to show for it. The library has their special revenue fund that they collect fees and things like that. That goes through their special revenue fund, and they watch this balance. And some of it is unassigned, some is the leftover grant that, and they spend that money in addition to what's in their general fund budget. The library also has an endowment fund. The endowment fund is, we can't spend the principal portion of the endowment. We have rules there. UPMIFA is the name of that says that we have to maintain the same spending power, so that although this might have been $25,000 when it was donated 60 years ago, the spending power is $455,000. And the way we do that is that they have set a policy that they're going to spend 4%. They're going to have, it's called a spending rule, that of what they earn, 4% a year is going to be allowed to be spent. So that'll come into this figure. This is how much they could spend of their total 681, and 455 is the principal that they have to keep it growing. This is new this year for the placement of it, not a new fund. We have the Wadelick Scholarship Funds. Again, that was changed with GASB 84, that they used to be showing as private purpose trust funds. But again, because of the new rules, they're now showing here as a permanent fund or an endowment fund. That same rules as we have to the library endowment fund apply to the Wadelick Scholarship Fund, that there's an amount here that's going to grow every year and we can spend it. We give out scholarships. We give out 2 scholarships a year for 4 years. It's $5,000 a year. That only 5 or 6 students apply for each one during the year. That there's certain rules, so you have to go into some scientific or nursing. It's set by the trusts. So if everyone continues on their schooling and gets it, we'll owe 97,000, and we have 62 that we can continue, and then that'll grow every year as we earn interest. We have an open space fund that if you set up a new development and you don't set aside open space, a playground, things like that, that you have to pay us money. And these are the fees that have been accumulated for that. And the Conservation Commission oversees this. And finally, we have the capital non-recurring fund. It's all the big projects that we spend for in cash. It's got a little asterisk here, meaning there's a schedule in the back that you can look to. That we have 2.9 million committed, meaning we've got projects going on, and you can see how they're totaled to make up 2.9 million. And then we have some money that's assigned that that we've set it aside. We thought we were going to use it in 21 to balance the budget. We didn't need to do that. So we think we're going to need to use it in 24 to balance the budget based on our latest estimates. So all of that we've talked about are short-term assets, short-term liabilities. So we're talking about that, it's called the modified accrual basis, but it's really short-term balance sheets and income statements that where we're measuring working capital. That's why if you look at the general fund or one of the funds, if we bring in more debt, that those of you that are accountants know that debt should be a liability, but we call it a revenue. We call it a revenue because it's adding to our working capital. And when we build the new school, we're calling it an expenditure. And we really say, no, that should be capitalized. But no, on this basis of accounting, it's an expenditure because it's using our working capital. So all of these, our fund balance is a measure of our working capital. So we go through all that with the short-term stuff, and then we have to get to the long-term stuff. Long-term stuff is capital assets. That those are things they're not going to turn into cash in a year. That and we have a number of capital assets that this is schools and vehicles, and I have to give a call out to Kevin, who unfortunately had the dinner plans tonight and couldn't be here, but we'll have him on to talk about this. He spent probably 80 to 100 hours or more on the capital assets. We didn't have a list of capital assets. That some of these are made up with a list that says, purchases from 2005. Okay, well, we can't tell you what that is, that we can't tell you if we still own it. So we did in your budget in the 2021 year, the Board of Finance budget, we hired a company to come in and appraise these assets and make a listing. He spent a lot of hours to compare that listing to the assessor's listing of properties, to Public Works listing of vehicles, to the police's listing of weapons and equipment. That they came in and did their job, and then he improved upon it. We didn't do Board of Ed, just the town side. And then we sent it back to the company to calculate the depreciation. And they said, you've made changes to over 1,000 assets. That's true, that he did a lot of work. But because of that they had to check each one. So we don't have the new depreciation listing, but so this will change for next year. We're just waiting for that company. We've been waiting since November 9th. Obviously, next year we're using a different company, but next year, when we go through this, these numbers will change. We'll call it a prior period adjustment, and we'll be able to use that schedule not only for the financial statements, which nobody really cares about, but we'll also be able to use it for our insurance purposes, and we'll have all the same schedule. We're building rules around it. For example, Jules has done a draft disposal policy of how we do that, how we keep this current. We'll have annual inventories where the departments have to inventory what their assets are. And okay, last year you should have had 10 chainsaws. What happened to them? So all that, because part of our job is protecting the assets of the town, and that's not just cash and checking accounts. It's capital assets as well. Pensions, that we want to talk about the pensions, that we're in really good shape with the pensions, that these are the important numbers that on the schedules from the financial statements. I forgot to write the page number, that but you can see back in 2014 that we only were 97% funded, that we didn't get such good interest rates in 2016, only less than 1%. So we were down to 89% funded. But this year, we got a wonderful interest on it for 27.7%, and we are 123% funded, which means that if everyone were to retire and we were to just stop, we would need $60 million, and we have 75 million. That don't get too excited that we could, a few years of bad interest rates could take that away just as fast. But ultimately, this will even itself out, that as we go through time by reducing our annual payment that we have to make, that we pay about $1.2 million a year. And actuaries don't do anything quickly. So slowly we'll see that reducing starting in 2024. OPEB, that people that have been grandfathered in, nobody else in the last 10 years or so, will get to stay on our health insurance plan after they retire. That and that's OPEB, other post-employment benefits other than pension. And so ours is health insurance. In our defense, that accountants just started accounting for this probably 10 years ago. So we never calculated it on the financial statements. That so nobody funded it because they didn't see the numbers. That and so back here we were 3.5% funded back in 2017, and now we're about 13% funded. That you'll see in the budget, we usually put in 200,000. We cut it back during the COVID, but I think in this year it's $150,000. So we're on a pay-as-you-go basis. So meaning that we're not using this money to pay for those pension benefits, those health insurance benefits for the retirees, where those are in the regular budget, and ultimately we'll use this money. And the liability went down substantially. One is a little change in the rules, and two is because we stopped having people in it, that new people could not join that. So that reduces the liability. We have firefighters have a pension plan for Local Service Award Program. LOSAP is what it's called. And that liability there, we don't fund this now. We're on a pay-as-you-go basis. We've got stipends, and then we've got the LOSAP payments that we pay monthly in the budget. But if we were to fund that, we would need $2.8 million. That's our liability there. So overall, we're not in bad shape with any of these. That we're actually one of the best in the state as far as the pension funding goes, and are back once we get more of these financial statements that have been filed with the state. We're going to do an update on that. But then we get to the debt, the bonded debt. We know that we have a lot of bonded debt, and so we started the year with $39 million. We had bond anticipation notes. That was the last year, as I said, that we did bond anticipation notes. We added to our debt. This paid off the bond anticipation notes and added 30 million for the new school, the first tranche of money. So at the end of the year, we had $70 million in bonded debt. Now we have to add to that 38 million that we just took out in October. So as of right now, we have closer to 108 million or 105 million with some payments of bonded debt. That's a lot of debt. And here we look at the debt compared to all the towns in the state. And the percentage we're looking at is the bonded debt. And I took today's number because it would be misleading to do the June 30th number. The bonded debt that we should have at the end of this year, based on the debt we have now, which I can't read that little number, but we would have the debt compared to our revenue would be 135%. That's scary because there's only one town with more debt than what we have. That as a ratio, and that's Thompson, Connecticut, in the northeast corner of the state. So when we say we have a lot of debt, we have more debt as a percentage than any other town except for one. So we've just and we recognize this when we did our model. Year after year, we've taken the money out and we've just bonded things. It's not free money. And that really hurt us at the school because we have all this debt, but we didn't have any new schools or fancy schools to show for it. So it's very important that we keep this one in mind. And then, of course, we can't talk about the debt without the debt bubble. You've seen this one before, that had you guys not done your planning, that the mill rate, someone called me the other day and said, when do we start paying the debt on the new school? Well, we started this year, and we can't have a new school and think that it's going to be free. So this is where the mill rate over here, the increase in the mill rate would have gone if you hadn't done the advanced planning of trying to flatten or smooth the debt bubble. And this is where we hope the mill rate's going to go. It's going to go up, but not in a fashion that it would have had you not planned this out in advance. All right. So then all of that, we mush all that together, the short-term balance sheets, the capital assets, the long-term debt, and we get to our equity that the page was too big to show on here. So I'm just showing you the important stuff, the equity part. That we have $60 million of equity on a full accrual basis. This would be like a business would do. Of our 60 million of equity, we have to look at the allocation that we have some invested in capital assets we just have to be careful that we don't invest everything in capital assets because nobody wants to be paid with a brick. They really like the liquid capital assets better. Some of that is restricted for different purposes. This is grants and things. This is Wadelick and the library endowment. And so this is our liquid equity, and that's pretty good shape. But the best thing, and there's no comparisons, this only came into play maybe 20 years ago, this full accrual stuff, so it's still new. And so the Moody's and the rating agencies don't even look at this, sadly enough. We can't really compare it because without having the IRS, it sets rules for capital assets. We can't, nobody's setting the rules on capital assets. It's kind of the Wild West. So we don't really know what to compare that to. Oops. I didn't put the slide in, but what we want to compare that to is where were we last year? And our long-term health went up by $9 million. It was 51 million last year, and it's 60 million this year. So that's fantastic that we're making decisions that are good for the short term. We're making decisions that are good for the long term. Any questions on 2021?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a couple comments if you're done with the 21 audit before we get into the
Yes.
22 and the monthly.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, Marcia, that was a great summary, not just of the audit, but of the overall financial position of the town as a whole. So thank you very much. It really is a luxury to have somebody of your experience running our finance department. So thank you very much. I think it's great. This is the 5th audit that I've been involved in, and darn it, they just keep on getting smoother, at least for me. I don't know about you, but for me, they just keep on getting smoother. The fact that you kind of glossed over the no findings, no deficiencies, no material weaknesses as a given is something that is not historically where we've been. I think this is the 2nd year in a row that that's the case, maybe 3rd. I think 3 years ago we did have something minor. But prior to that, there was a number of things that the finance department wasn't doing or doing well. And, it's a testament not only to you and your team, but also I think Bob is still on, to Ken and the Board of Ed's team because this is an audit of both the town and the school, which is part of the town. And that both organizations went through an audit with no findings, and that's almost expected now is wonderful. So I just wanted to highlight that.
And we also had no journal entries, that they didn't make any adjustments to the numbers we gave them.
Wonderful. Just a couple of things that I thought were important that I wanted to point out that you mentioned, but I wanted to, that are particularly important to me. The fact that you highlighted the discipline on the fund balance and the fund balance policy is really important. I'm glad that you highlighted that. That's something that we have to pay really important attention to as we move forward because of where you ended, which was the very high bonded debt. That is the one glaring risk to everything. So we got to pay real attention to that. Maintaining that fund balance is critical. If the budget grows and the fund balance doesn't, then by definition the fund balance is decreasing. So we have to not only increase the fund balance in percentage wise, we have to increase it dollar wise just to stand pat. So I just want everybody to understand that. And finally, the other accomplishment that I think is really extremely valuable is that capital asset schedule. That's going to just provide tremendous value to the town as you manage your department, and also to us as we ask questions. So just a bang up job all around. And I just thank you so much.
Thank you. The big value in the capital asset schedule is, unfortunately, if there's a huge problem, which we never want to have happen.
Right.
Eileen, you want to add to that? Eileen?
Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. No, I mean, I think it's fantastic that we've had, these successful audits. I think that says a lot about our financial position, and what Marcia said and what Dan said are always spot on. So I don't have anything else to add.
Brianna?
No, I'm good.
Mary?
Yeah, sounds like a job really well done. Kudos to everyone, and thanks for such a great explanation.
Okay. Marcia, again, thank you. And for those listening, these are all of the considerations that we take into when we're making our decisions. So we look at all of this. We work closely with Marcia and the first selectman, and our decisions are based off of a lot of these key indicators and how to run the town. On a side note, for the first selectman, Tara, as going through your budget, we went over a point in this audit report for the policeman's fund for their outside work. And generally, we try to keep that at $150,000. I think it was a surplus over that. So maybe in your budget process, you can talk with Chief and see if there's things we can use that for. And in the past, we've asked them to work with us on utilizing those outside funds for some of the items. So you may want to put that in your notes.
And we can't require them that, and I can send you, Tara, the policy. We can't require them to spend it, but we could ask them to spend it. And they go through their own process to approve that with their commission.
Yeah, it's just an added tool possibly when you're doing your budget. That's all.
Got it. What was that in reference to a certain page that we just went over, or something?
Marcia could probably show you that offline. It's the policeman's outside work fund. We
Okay.
try to keep that at $150,000 balance in case something arises. That was like our standing agreement. It is over that. And like Marcia said, we can't force them to, but we can ask them if there's certain items, if we can utilize that. And in a tough budget year in past, we've been able to find a good working way forward on that.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay. All right, we're on to now. Anybody else before Marcia goes on to the financials? Hearing none, go ahead, Marcia, move on.
All right, let's talk about this year. First of all, our economic recovery dashboard, we got a lot of COVID out there. So this is using the state's data where we might stand, but unlike last year, that we don't have the unemployment concerns that we were facing a year ago. That the unemployment is down. Tax revenues, this is the current year tax revenues. They're on target. That they shouldn't change much from year to year. That if they change, that we think, oh, something must be wrong. So the current year tax revenues are on target. The back tax revenues, this is how much we've collected, and these are the 4 prior years or 5 prior years. We're doing great. We're doing great on the back tax revenues. Part of that is because we have, with COVID, she could not do the tax sales on the normal schedule that she did the tax sales. So the tax sale letters went out in August, and you can see a bunch of people paid in August. And then the tax sales were in October, and a bunch of people paid before the tax sales. They paid off their taxes. The money from the tax sales, the sale of the property, is not included in here because we've got to go 6 months before it's actually earned. And in most cases, the people whose property was sold, they find the money to pay things off, and it's all handled, and we have to pay the interest on the money that we've been holding, but that's not shown in the revenue. So these are great, the back tax revenues, but we want to remember that this is on a cash basis. On an accrual basis, these 2 months, July and August, really get pushed back to last year. And we'll pick up the July and August of 2022 into this year. It's just the way the accounting works. You can think of it more as a cash basis from September of 21 to August of 22. So we want to, although we look like we're going to be over budget, we want to make sure we remember that this is an anomaly, that July and August were so good. And so we may not actually end up with money, extra money in the budget for that. Interest, because it kind of follows the same thing as the back taxes. We're doing great on the interest. Building permits, this is the building permits for this year. So we're not doing great on the building permits we base our building permits on two different factors. One is the average building permit. For the last, I think it was 5 years that we averaged the small building permits. And then we also add to it some of the big building permits that we know are coming. The builders are having the same problem that we are getting the supplies and so we're not sure that we're going to get the 2 or 3 big ones that we had in the budget. However, we may get another one that would offset that. So it's really too early to tell where we'll end up in total. But right now, the building permits are down. And when I checked about it, that a lot of the permits are for generators and propane tanks, as well as smaller jobs and when the price of lumber comes back down, they're expecting the building permits to go back up. Conveyance taxes, we're having a great year, not quite as great as last year. If you look, there's not a lot of inventory out there and they've been busy right up and through up to like the 2 weeks before December, that they were very, very busy with sales of property and closings, and that slowed down. I don't know if it's just the holidays and it'll start back up, but that is still very good. So if we look at the revenues that you received the schedule in advance, that we look at the taxes, we will have more money, our predictions for the supplemental taxes. That's because we talked last month about all the additional cars that we had the biggest year. We had a graph that showed the biggest year ever of supplemental taxes. And even though the back taxes are so high, because July and August were so big, we're going to have to subtract that back out, about 300,000. I didn't project an overage there yet, because if July and August next year go back to where it was, so far there's not an overage, but we're going to keep watching that. The licenses and permits, that we just talked about the building permits, that and again, that some of them, the big ones may not come in, but the little ones, but they might be replaced with additional ones. So it's still too early to tell there. That for intergovernmental revenues, that FEMA, that we don't count that as revenue until we actually get it, because they go through the issues with the bats and the other things that we think we're going to get revenue, and then they say, well, we can penalize you if you cut down a tree with a bat in it. But this is Storm Isaias, that we have 241,000. And again, I'll give the shout out to Kevin. We've pulled FEMA money into our was in land use, asking for FEMA reimbursements. We've pulled it into finance. I think it's more appropriate in there that Kevin does this, and he spends hours with the fire department, the WPCA, the Board of Ed, saying, how many hours on your generator? Did you think about this? What about this? And then he spends hours with the FEMA manager to say, no, we think we need that. And they say, well, we need a letter from your insurance company to say that you're not going to get reimbursed. And he does all that tracking. And so this was 241,000 that we think we're going to get based on where we stand now. That and this is after we gave 30,000 to Center Fire to reimburse them for their costs. That we have Storm Ida that happened in September, 1st of September sometime, that it has not been claimed as a disaster yet for Connecticut, although some of the other towns it was. We have significant amount of costs for that. Isaias happened in August of last year and wasn't claimed a disaster until February of 21. So sometimes it happens really late, so we still don't know about that. Other than that, we don't know of any anomalies with the grants in the general fund. The town clerk, as I said, that they are cranking out the work down there. That just conservatively, I was estimating maybe it will be $65,000 over budget. That's just taking and comparing that a regular budget with this first 6 months actual, and then the budget for the second 6 months. That we'll see that later, that we have to do a transfer because of all of this work, that she's running out of books to put all the recordings in. So she needs $2,500 for that. Nothing exciting up here, that but we will have extra money that we've sold some assets that and cars that are worthless are getting a lot of good money from them right now. So so that's what this is. So right now we're looking good that we'll have more revenues than what we had anticipated. With respect to the expenditures, we are asking for budget transfers that we knew about the CSEA union. We don't like to tip our hand and put it in the budget before the union contract is done. So we knew that was going to have to come out of contingency. And so on your schedule of transfers, they are highlighted in light blue. So I tried to match the light blue here. That but they add up to 36,000 that would come out of contingency and go into the various line items for union salaries. That there's some software for IT. We've talked about this a number of times, trying to bring up the security to the ever-moving target of cybersecurity insurance. We've had to do some stuff with Microsoft. We've had to do some stuff with Duo. That's what makes up the bulk of this. Duo is a new program for multi-factor authentication on every single program. We have 5 IT directors in town between the various entities. They all met, they all agreed. So that's what a lot of this is. I did not take the money out of cybersecurity insurance because hopefully we'll still be able to get that for part of the year. And as I understand, those prices are still going up. So we took that from other places. And then we're finding a lot with the software that companies have merged. Companies have held flat during the pandemic, and now they're going to go up. This was Seamless Docs, and they merged with another company, and the price, and it was held flat for 3 years, and it's not this year. The town clerk, this is for the extra volumes we just talked about. Land use added a part-time employee that through December, and Tara is working on that department. Stop that for now. So this is costs up until Tara started, or Tara stopped it. That unemployment benefits, the federal government keeps extending the unemployment benefits. We've got some people that have been on for 2 years that they used to pay for it, and they're not now. But that should end as of January 8th, all the extended benefits, unless they do something else. Blight costs, these are mostly legal fees for blight. The $9,500 are legal costs, $1,500 are boarding things up and stuff. Firefighter stipends, we estimate the number of firefighters, we were off by 1. Social services has a higher software cost. They've got such a tiny budget that we couldn't take it out of their own internal department. This we talked about was the snow removal rental for the elementary school, the Huckleberry. We talked about spending it and having it backstopped by the school project if needed. And so here we're trying to fit it in. Where are we going to get the money for these? Fire marshal is on called into service for the National Guard. And so we don't have him working for us, so we've saved on that salary. The transfer to heart and hypertension, unfortunately, one of our beneficiaries died. So we don't need to make that transfer to bring that fund up to a positive fund balance. And then we've saved some money. This isn't all the savings, but this is what we needed to balance on the bonds due to refinancing in October. So those are the budget transfers we're going to ask you for. Any questions on those? All right. Other things that we know about in this year's expenditures, we're putting in a new time and attendance system. Phase one is all hourly employees except the certified police officers. We are right in the midst of that right now. Today we finished our first payroll using the new system that we were parallel testing in December. The Board of Ed is doing the same. The WPCA is doing the same. We have trying to get it all to work. It's I have to say that Dan has been wonderful. Lisa, the HR assistant, is doing work there. We had to rework everything in Munis so we can bring that up to the best practices before we did this. And Lori, my payroll clerk, that just struggled through this week's payroll. Like Dan was talking before the meeting, that when you pull it into Excel, we found out, oh, it drops the 0 in the front, and then she had to do a lot of manual things. So a lot of little things that we're learning. There's 2 areas that we have not done yet, even though they're included here. The dispatchers, we've learned so much with this about our old system. The dispatchers do shift switches, and so that they might work a 48-hour week and then a 24-hour week, but they get paid the same number of hours and nobody gets overtime. And I thought, oh, that can't be legal, but we have the attorney that because they're dispatchers and some rule that came up a few years ago, they can do that, but trying to get the timesheets to match these weird things that they do. So we've got to still put them in, and to be honest, it's waiting for me. We've got some people that are non-exempt salaried that we really need to be calculating their hours, that because they should be getting paid for anything over 40 hours. And so we've been working through that, so they have not been put on yet. The effect on the budget is going to be here on overtime. What we're learning is under the old system, people would put in what you call bulk hours to say, I work 7 hours, 7 hours, 7 hours. And it's not accurate. This is very accurate. So if they come in early, we're calculating it. There's times that someone has said, well, I work through lunch. Well, we owe them money for that. So we're going to find there's places where people get overtime that didn't before, like 15 minutes, a week or an hour a week or whatever it is, that hadn't been captured in the old system. We're required to pay them for that. The managers know that we're required to pay them for that, that they know that they have to approve it, and that if someone's coming in, let's say someone's coming in 15 minutes early, it's their responsibility to talk to that employee to say, wait a minute, you're not authorized for overtime. But some of these things, you'll see some of the departments have signs on the door that we don't do anything new after 3:45, so they don't have to work overtime. Well, let's do good customer service. 15 minutes of overtime is $20 or $10 maybe, or less. So we will see some changes in overtime. With respect to next year, we're not putting any in the budget. It should be pretty immaterial. We don't want to have a little cushion of overtime in every department. So we will do it with transfers, just like we do with the perfect attendance bonuses.
Marcia, I'm sorry, on that slide, I have a quick question. Something I've never asked you, strangely, but how was the Kronos? Was that something that was approved through through the boards, or how did that come to be?
It was approved through the boards. The Board of Ed was going to do it originally. Theirs was approved a year before ours, because they're up until now have been, and they've got some real champions on that side working on it. They approved it first because they were still using paper timesheets and then adding up the paper and putting it into Excel worksheets and bringing it into the payroll system. And then we have on our side that when I came in, I said, well, we've got an issue because the state law says that we can't do bulk hours for hourly employees, that we have to know what time they started and what time they ended. If we don't have that and they say they worked overtime, it's our job to prove that they didn't. But that's a state law that we have to have the start and finish times. So we had to switch, and Munis doesn't do that. So we knew we had to switch. So we added it a year later. We've worked on it, and then WPCA jumped in. We've worked together on it to implement it. But it went through all the boards for approval as any other capital project that so
Thank you.
It's been a long time in coming.
Gotcha.
Again, from our this is from our economic dashboard that I didn't get out to in advance, so I'm showing it here, that these are our what we thought were our most volatile expenditures. This is the human resource professional fees that right now for the actuary that we're 50% through the year and we've spent 39%. They only bill every quarter, so this could change quickly. For the labor attorney, we're 50% through the year and we've billed 28%. However, we had some money in there for an extra 10,000 for updating the non-union labor rules. So we should be less than 50%. And then this is for the pension attorney, that 50% through the year, but we've spent, this is the budget, and we've spent 68%, as it talks up here. That so that one that we're watching, that if this goes over, we hope one of these will go under. And then the other one is police overtime. I didn't get a chance to talk to Jay because I just did this an hour ago. That but our police overtime is higher than what it normally is. That and this is through December. December jumped up more than normal because it's a 3 payroll month, but it's still higher. We want to keep watching that, and this is before we've used the police for things like distribution of test kits and stuff, that which was in January. I don't know if, I would imagine that's overtime. That any questions on 2022? All right. Other issues or things to talk about, not issues. We're working on the budget. The budget workbooks are due by the departments on Friday, and we'll start compiling them next week. That known issues, that health insurance, that both the Board of Ed and the town are using. We're trying to figure out, obviously for Ken and I, it would be best if we said, oh, we think it's going to be 13%, because we always want to be under. But what we tried to do is we would say we would try the actuary's assumption when they do OPEB, that they've calculated what they think the increase would be. And we starting, I think 2 years ago, we used this methodology, the actuary's assumption of what it should be for the year plus 0.5%. We got a letter from the the state, which is we're on their health insurance plan, saying that they were going to be putting some of their ARPA money into their reserves for health insurance. And that should have a positive effect on the increase in the budget. And Ken talked to them. And so this number here would be 7%. Ken emailed them and said, all right, that what would you say that positive, because they're saying they're putting, 38 million in. Okay, well, how does that equate to our rates? And they were thinking that it was going to bring the rate down 4% is what the person emailed, but they're not committing yet. So what we did in our health insurance, what they did and what we will do is we started with 7%. We don't know how much authority that person has, how much, if they're right or not. We don't even know if the 7% is right. So we were going to subtract 3% and assume a 4% increase in health insurance and in our budgets until we hear more. They also said that they should give us a better number in February. Well, we've never had one that early. So that's encouraging. The police, we've talked about subscription-based services. Some of these things that used to be capital projects will have to start going into the operating. Parks and Rec, we've talked about changing some of the maintenance. We shouldn't be talking about putting new mulch on the playgrounds as a capital expenditure. We'd like to see them put an amount of money, and she's scheduled it out every year. That's $50,000 to $60,000. It'll just come out of capital. We'd still have to spend it, but it's just a placement change here. Fuel and heating oil that we've checked as recent as Monday, and the prices are still high. So would normally go out for an RFP now, but we don't want to lock in the high prices. So we're going to take our chances and go a little further into the year. We don't have to do it until June. And then we're hearing from many departments that they're seeing increasing costs, especially for software and technology items. And we'll highlight those in the workbooks of, why they couldn't stay to 0% increase on their non-payroll operations. The capital committee has been working and they've been having meetings with different departments. That's where we stand on the 23 budget. And finally, ARPA rules that we've been working since May on the interim ARPA rules, and the final ARPA rules have come out. That and really the one that's the most interesting to us. Sorry, go back. The one that's the most interesting to us is this one here, that we had calculated after hours of work a $1.9 million revenue loss that it takes an awful lot of time. Plus, they wanted to calculate on a calendar year, and we can't even pull a calendar year report from Munis. We had calculated a $1.9 million revenue loss, and now with these final rules, they're saying, hey, that's a lot of work. So why don't you just assume that you can take a standard allowance for a revenue loss of $10 million or your ARPA grant, whichever is lower. So we could actually assume that our whole ARPA grant is revenue loss. And what that means to us is just freeing things up that for revenue loss, we have a lot more categories. General government expenditures is what they keep talking. We could free that up for any number of things. So that's a huge change there. That they also changed some other things. They made it clear that yes, you can use it for capital expenditures as long as it's the right function. That would again be, and they've increased some of their water and sewer and broadband allowable things. But this is certainly the biggest of any of the items that have come out of the final rules. So
and over what period of time does that revenue loss have to be applied? How many budgets?
We have to use it by December 31st, 2024.
Wow. Thank you.
So that is a huge thing that, that's all I've got. Any questions?
You're ending on a bang.
All right.
Wait, out of the ARPA money, you had already placed a portion of that in the debt bubble graph, correct?
Yes, that we do have the 1.9 million in the 2023 budget. All of them have different timing issues that, let me go back. All of the things have different timing requirements. So,
Oh, there it is. Yep.
so this is where the yellow is where the debt was before we started the new school. That's our baseline. And the green is where the debt is after the new school. And so the offsetting items are these blue. This is a one-time source of money, which is the bond money.
Yep, the bond premium. Yep.
This is the one-time, so not the bond premium, thank you. This is the bond premium from this year that we'll use next year, because we've got to use that in 18 months. This, you can see this is when the first tranche of money, the principal hits. We're just paying interest here and here. The principal hits here. So that's a big bang that, so we would need to use, here's the dollars over here. We would need to use more than other years. We would have to, what we're thinking is we're going to use the revenue loss money, the 1.9 million plus some of that money that we saw of that 1.7 million that we have tucked aside in capital non-recurring. That and then this year, I believe that is
The Iroquois money that we had talked about probably.
No, we didn't want to use the Iroquois money. That
Okay.
I think this is some general fund money that we're tucking aside. And then some more capital and recurring. I've got the Excel that shows me what it is, but the reason we don't want to use the Iroquois money is not only do we have to deal with this debt bubble, but we have to deal with not having as much capital money to spend. And we had committed when we did that model that we wanted to say any big increases in development that bring in big increases in taxes, we want to shove into the capital expenditure budget to pay for in cash and not do. So that's why the Iroquois is not here.
All right.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So next year, even using the partial amount of the ARPA funding, we're still going to fall $1 million shy.
We're still gonna be short. The 2023, 2024, next year being 2024. Yes, we're still gonna every year we're still gonna have to increase the mill rate, but it's not like we would have had to do that.
Great.
Yeah, 2024 is the huge debt service increase of, $2.5-ish million that even the 1.9 ARPA money doesn't fully cover. But now, depending on what the various committees decide to do, we might have some more ability, which is cool.
Yeah. And Colette from the ARPA committee has given us access to their schedule, given us being the capital committee. So Ricky and Tara and I, the link so that they can kind of look at where the ARPA committee is for requests compared to capital, because we know some are doubled up. For example, Brookfield Volunteer Fire Company, Center Fire, has got some things that they've asked for in ARPA, and they've also asked for in the capital budget. And so they're trying to get all that coordinated.
And I think Mary can present next meeting on the ARPA, because she's going to be our arm in the ARPA. So we'll have more of an update from ARPA from Mary at our next meeting.
All right. Any other questions?
I have some. based on the budget going forward quick, and I know it's a long meeting, but the revenue side, the way the patterns are tracking, I mean, we had 2 good years in a row, and your graphs all showed we're sort of lagging a little this year due to the sales of homes and all of that. So are we going to take that into account when we're projecting the revenues, that we aren't quite meeting the prior years in those areas?
Well, in our budget, we didn't really project for the bump, the continued bump. We thought COVID was going to be done.
Right.
So we didn't project for the continued bump, which is why we'll have extra revenue here. So it should make a difference in that we'll have more money, more revenue this year over budget, but it shouldn't make a huge difference in next year's increase. There shouldn't be a decrease in revenue. That with respect to the building permit fees, I think we were talking for one-time revenues. I think the total was maybe 80,000. So it's not like we got this. What was it with 1 year? It was $200,000 or $300,000. That
right. The Branson building helped us that year.
Yes.
Okay. And the other question I have is the reval impact, like whether there was, are we doing like an analysis and the tax rate between like the commercial, the residentials, and what we're gaining? I know the mill rate is just a wash of meeting the budget, but I mean, do we expect any impacts from the revaluation with the commercial and residential properties?
So on that, that she does have the averages, that the residential went up higher than if you live on Candlewood Lake, you're going to feel the most impact of that, because the residential went up the highest, mostly around the lake. That the commercial didn't go up very much at all. And so I'm trying to figure out how we would best show that because there's 2 pieces of someone's taxes, that what is the effect of your assessment change, that and what is the effect of a tax increase, that and so how do we best show that and maybe what we do is we do the average house at the bottom of our budget summary, is we do, here was the average house before, here's the average house now, showing that percent. We did check with the assessor, is there a way to calculate every year our grand list grows by, I think our model showed that we were thinking 0.96% a year. Is there a way to show, to decipher how much of the change is based on a change in values and how much is a growth in the grand list? And they can't give us that information. Yeah, so it's going to be, I'm trying to figure out the most appropriate way to do that, and what type of we have a little worksheet on the website to say, oh, what are your taxes going to be with this mill rate? Is there a way we can do a calculation that would say, here's how much your taxes went up or down because of the change in assessment, and here's how much your taxes went up because of the change in the budget.
Yeah, that's going to be a challenging communication, but it's going to be so important. There's so much confusion out there that we'll have to. I'd love to be a part of figuring out how to communicate that.
I think that you are chairing that committee.
Wow.
I heard a volunteer.
All right.
I think you'll have to speak with Tara on that and see what you can work out.
I certainly get involved in some online conversations about it. I'll give you that.
Thanks, Dan. I have 2 comments, actually, if nobody else, or were you done there? Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Just on the police for those 2 days of the test kit distro, there were 2 officers who were paid overtime for both days, so 4 total for the 2 days.
All right, so that shouldn't be a big deal.
I think maybe the uptick for the December that we saw there on the overtime for the police was maybe the additional officers at the school project or the pipeline, actually. So
Okay.
I'm checking with Chief on that.
Yeah. and
Any
we've
other
got
questions?
Some sick
Sorry.
time, changes have made a difference in there as well.
Any other? Go ahead.
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions, just based on the budget, the revenue budget report that you sent out. For the conveyance fees, I see that they're down a bit, but when you look at like any of the realtor.com or anything, there's not a whole lot of houses on the market right now. Do we anticipate that we will meet that number for conveyance fees?
We do, that they're down from last year. But again, we thought COVID was going to be over. So the budget was down from our last year's actual.
Okay. Okay. And then the ECS grant, that one, do we get the next 75% in March? I forgot what the timeline is for that.
We get 25% in October. We get 25% in January, and we get 50% in April.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that was it. Thanks.
Anyone else with any questions? Marcia, anything else?
I got nothing.
All right, well, thank you, as always. Appreciate it all. Okay, so now the audit we basically talked about. Dan, you want to add anything on top of that?
No, we're good.
Old business, we don't have any. So we're on to new business and the budget transfers. So I would like to make a motion that we approve the interdepartment transfers proposed in the budget to actual report dated December 27th, 2021, as outlined in the attached report from Marcia Marion, Controller / Director of Finance. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any discussions on what she presented?
No.
Hearing none, let's go to vote. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. All right, on to the budget season. Marcia, if you wouldn't mind. We put together this little presentation for those who are new and for Tara, who's not gone through the budget cycle either yet. So all we did is take what we've done in prior years and we put it in a small presentation for everybody to follow. So go ahead. So basically, these are the key dates that we have to hit. January 16th, Tara mentioned earlier, as her report has to be to put out the budgetary needs. The town departments have to get it to the first selectman for the budgetary needs. The BOE has to have their budget to the first selectman by January 31st. February 14th, the first selectman's budget to the Board of Finance. March 2nd, the Board of Selectmen budget to the Board of Finance. In March, we do our deliberations as the Board of Finance, and we'll have the schedule on the next slide. March 19th, we have to have the Board of Finance, the town clerk, a budget. March 29th, we're going to present a budget at a town meeting. We can adjust this date as needed, but it still has to fall within the guidelines. On April 23rd, we have to have the Board of Finance budget to the town clerk. And then by May 3rd, we have our annual town meeting, which is done by the charter. And then by May 17th, we go to a referendum. So those are the key dates for everybody. Now our dates, March 2nd, we usually had the BOF meeting for the Board of Selectmen budget presentation, which is an overview. March 3rd is we have our budget workshop. We put in the capital committee early on March 3rd. So because it's a big piece of going forward. So we would invite the capital committee to come to us on that date. Then March 8th, the BOE we'd like to slate in there because another big piece of the budget. So we have enough time to go over that. March 9th is our regular meeting and general budget discussions. We try to keep that meeting short on the financials for Marcia and short on the first selectman report, other than critical items, so we can get on to the budget process. March 10th, March 14th, and March 15th, we would like to invite the town departments to come give their presentations to us as they have in the past. We generally try to do 2 or 3 departments a night during that process. March 16th, we would deliberate, and March 17th, we would hopefully have the final deliberations. We don't know where COVID is headed, and we're going to try to meet in person if we can, but if we can't, we will meet virtual, and all of our meetings will start at 7 p.m.
So I haven't concentrated on this before. That's half the deliberation nights than we normally have.
Yes, we can do more, Dan, but I really try to keep it Tuesdays through Thursdays for us. Again, this is for discussion. How's that? So I think the way the budget has come to us in the recent 2 years, it's been tight enough where each night we really get a good picture of where those departments stand. So, I mean, we can change this.
We can change it on the fly. I don't know. That's 2 days of just 1 day of deliberation, 1 day of spare. It just seems rushing it to me. But we can see how it goes during the month, and we can add meetings if we need.
Okay. Anyone else have concerns on our team?
I have a question, if I may. Your bottom comment, is that to see what COVID does by then, or is that, what are you saying?
Yeah.
You're gonna.
We are going to talk as a group about, and we haven't discussed this yet, about next meeting trying to be in person. We're going to have that discussion offline. And I think we work better as a group in a room, but I need to speak with the team and make sure of all of this. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay. This also would lead into, Dan, what you were talking about. This year, we're going to try to limit the periods, but get the information in. So we're proposing a 30-minute time period for each department. Bring all appropriate personnel required. For the first time, I looked at setting some slide guidelines to see if we can just, in the past, all the departments presented to us, but it was all different formats, different ways of presenting, trying to get us to a point of we can present it in one format. So I'd like to try to talk about the template guidelines in the next slide. We obviously coordinate with you, Tara, on what departments you would like to have come, at certain nights. They're your people, your departments. We would work with you on how many we'd like to do. Sometimes we have had departments that we have enough information. We didn't really need any real presentations, but it's always their opportunity to speak before us. Next slide. This is what I was looking at as where we're at, like slide 1, a little bit of background information, some accomplishments, any special news. Slide 2, like your key performance indicators, what's driving your budgets, what's driving your problems, what's driving any concerns, your hardships, your goals for next year. What budget items should we discuss? Like the revenues, the operating, next priority forms, capital this year, capital in upcoming years, and the thinking out of the box. Where can we help as a Board of Finance, help the first selectman reach their goals of running an efficient town hall? I think we need to listen, and we got a lot of challenges ahead of us. And I'd like to keep it goal specific, because a lot of times these presentations get a little off the record, and we're trying to streamline it and understand what we need to do to help. How's that? Dan, any thoughts?
Sounds good. I think it's a good template.
It may be too much the first year, but I think we need to get it to a point where it's pretty streamlined. And once we get through the pain of the first year, and Tara, your input's important too, is I think it becomes easier each year for each department to present to us if they have a template to go by, instead of, usually in the past, the departments were told, give a presentation to the Board of Finance, and it was just their presentation, their formats. And I think it's easier to follow a concise format. And then once you get that process or procedure in place, it becomes almost canned, right? The next year becomes easier, the next year becomes easier. And the same thing for the people looking at the information as well.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's a great idea.
Eileen, you want to comment? Because this is really the first time we talked about this.
No, I think it's fine. I like the idea of having a template. We've had, definitely a couple of years where we've had very long presentations, and I think if we can keep it succinct and in an order that, we're following and getting the information we need, it's better.
Mary, you want to add a comment to that as well?
Yeah, I've been watching this process a little from the outside, so it's not completely new to me. But yeah, that looks really streamlined and efficient. And if anything, I expected more meeting dates, which, may still happen, but no, looks great.
Brianna, you want to comment?
No, I think it's good. I think we've been doing well with it. And like everybody said, if we need to add a meeting here or there, we do. If not, we're good to go.
Okay, I think, Dan, to your comments, and we can talk about now that I presented it, is we can go back and see if we can keep them to a half hour like we talked about. We may be able to fit in 4 a night, like a 2-hour window, and then leave a half an hour at the end for discussion amongst ourselves.
Yep.
We might fit in the departments. And I think the key now would be for Tara and Marcia to look at what we've presented as in the templates, see what they can and cannot do without too much pain, right? And then see if we can fit 4 departments in a night. And I think I think Marcia and Tara would have the best idea of how to group them, because they know which ones are going to take longer time to present. So maybe we can do like a couple long ones and a couple short ones in a night. I know we're trying to limit to a half hour, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. So I think Tara and Marcia, if you could look that over, and again, Tara, it's your departments. See how you'd like to stack them up. Generally, we've done, and Marcia knows, we've done the fire departments in the same night in the past. I think you can coordinate that.
Sure. Would you do me a favor, Glenn? Thanks for putting that deck together. Could you email that over to me when you get a chance?
I can, yes. And then I think, Eileen, did you have last year's schedule handy? Or I think Marcia had last year's schedule handy.
I don't have it handy. I have it, but I'd have to look.
All right. Marcia or Eileen, I think you had the best record of that. If we could forward that to Tara too and see how we did it last year, so she has an idea of maybe, again, Tara, it's your departments. We don't like to dictate who comes. We like you to be able to work with us. How's that?
Yeah, see what works for everybody. So yeah, that'd be great if you could just send me the schedule from last year.
Okay, perfect.
I can do that, and I'll send that. And I think that it'll be more telling next week once we have the department budgets. I mean, if they've gone up 0% except for this one item that's enumerated on their workbook, that we may not need to meet with them. That let's not waste anyone's time.
That's what I'm saying. I think that's up to you, the leaders, right? Tara and Marcia, to guide us on that.
Yeah, I think Ginny probably has a schedule too, to determine which departments have presented in the past. So check with her.
Perfect.
I found it. I can mail it to everybody.
All right. Brianna, you wanted to add something?
No, I think I'm probably ahead of myself. And then at some point I have to send that out, our schedule, right, to Andrea.
Yes, we do. And
Okay.
that's why we talked about it tonight.
Yep.
This will give Tara and Marcia some time. They're putting together their budget this week. Obviously, they're getting their department budgets by the 16th. So then they will have a handle on where they see the key departments to present to us are, and they can put it in the schedule. I think that's the best way to tackle this. We can confirm our budget schedule for the next meeting. I don't think that's a stretch. That's a month away. Tara, is that okay with you that we can try to finalize that at our next meeting?
Yeah, I'm perfectly okay with that. Thank you.
And that way we're all on the same, and we can move it around. We could be flexible even in March. The only thing is they are special meetings for us.
Yeah.
So when we post our agenda, we can't deviate from our agenda.
You gotta do it now.
We can cancel someone off, but we can't add someone on. So in other words, if we listed the fire department, the land use department, and the land use couldn't come, we could cancel the land use out. But we can't add in the tax assessor if they were gonna present. So we could be flexible during, or if we have enough time ahead, we could change the special agenda. So, I mean, we could be flexible with it, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Also, under new business, we got some information, and sorry I cut you off earlier, but I wanted to put it under the new business, Tara, we got a feedback from the town attorney today on first of all, we had a resignation from the Board of Finance. I'd like to thank Tom for his time. Tom Devanzo resigned. He resigned due to compliance issues with his company for his new promotion. Congratulations on his new promotion. And we now have an opening on the Board of Finance that we have to fill. We need to fill that. We can't fill it within the first 10 days of resignation, but we have to fill it within 60 days of the resignation, or the Board of Selectmen would fill the position. We had gotten a ruling in the past that it could be open to Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated, but we reached out to the town attorney today, and his feedback, and I'll let Tara say it because the email was through her. The feedback, generally consensus. Go ahead, Tara. Or you want me to continue? I could just summarize it if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. I got to pull it up and I have to find the third
The
paragraph.
summary of it is that we have to go with the party that it was. We have to replace the party with the party. Here, it is the opinion in interpreting the charter as a whole that the vacancy should be filled by an individual of the same political party. I believe that this is the interpretation most consistent with the charter and the law. So this is what we're going to have to go by. I think we've asked the Tara and her team to post that for us on the website, that we have an opening. We will start taking interviews. I'd like to put on there that we're going to stop taking interviews by February 5th. I mean, taking up applications for the position by February 5th, that we can then interview people and have the person ready for the next meeting. Is there any comments to that? Dan, Eileen, Brianna, Mary?
I make a comment. I put my hand up.
Okay, Marcia, make a comment,
Oh,
please.
I just want to say that it's not unusual for town attorneys to have different opinions. That from my audit days, I might have 20 municipal clients in a year, and know that that in these 5 towns, that it was usually on leases if they have to go to a town meeting or not. In these 5 towns, that they would have to go to a town meeting because that's what those town attorneys said, and these 15 towns that wouldn't because that's what those town attorneys said. So this is a pretty normal thing for town attorneys to have different opinions, but whoever is the town attorney in the town sets the law.
I think that's how we're looking at it as well. I think that's the in my opinion, the proper way to handle this. And I also, Tara, your opinion?
Yeah, there seemed to have been some other dialogue from back years, I think, where Steve Dunn actually said an R fills an R and a D fills a D. And then all of a sudden that Tom Beecher email popped up and I didn't look at the dates between those two. So there was some discrepancy there as well. Moving forward, we now have a town attorney, and beyond, even before today, he started to look at the issue since you reached out and asked me about it, Glenn. So I'm very comfortable with what Attorney Kokinos is saying, and it looks like we need to go with the same political party.
Okay, I think that's how we're going to go forward. So if you could post it that way, I think that's the right way to go. And I agree with Marcia's comments as well, that I think that's the way we need to go. So that being said, let's get it posted. If you could put February 5th, like I said, as the deadline for receiving and wants to be on the board, then we can get into the interview process. So thank you.
Well, so actually, so when's our next meeting?
February 13th, that's something, isn't it?
I think it's the 9th.
It's the 9th. So that doesn't go as much. If we don't have resumes till
February 9th.
February 5th, then we have the weekend, then we have 2 days in a meeting. We might want to make the deadline sooner.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm open.
I think the Friday before is the right date personally.
So right now is the 12th, so that would give
2 weeks.
2 weeks plus. All right, the 28th, January
Yeah.
28th.
January 28th.
Yeah.
On it.
So then, Dan, since we're pointing this all out, right? I mean, I appreciate this because it's something
Yeah.
important. So then we would schedule interviews for February 1 and February 2. Would that work for everybody?
Yes.
Depending on the amount of people, obviously, but I mean, I'd like to limit it to the middle of the week like we have been doing, so we all have some weekend time before budget season.
That works well for me.
Fine with me.
Eileen,
Yeah, it's okay.
Brianna?
Fine with me.
All right, and Tara, we have invited the first selectman as well as Marcia to these meetings as well. So you will have a welcome invite when we do the interviews. I don't think it's necessary you're there, but we'd like to have your presence. And the same with Marcia, since she works closely with our team.
Thank you.
So that's how we'll handle that. Okay. Next, for new business, I'd like to talk about the discussion about the library and how that went. And there's been some correspondence between our team and Tara and the Board of Selectmen and the library. I gave Tara some wrong information at the Board of Selectmen meeting off the cuff of my interpretation that I didn't quite remember it correctly. And Dan wrote an email, and I'd like Dan to maybe speak to his email a little bit about, what the purpose behind it, and let's get it forward and get it right. So go ahead,
Sure.
Dan.
So Tara, I appreciate your response to the email. I didn't mean, I reread it after I sent it. I didn't mean to come across as anything other than offering background information that I had as opposed to anything else. And really it was as much about the knowledge of the Board of Finance incumbents and as the library itself. And there's just a wealth of background and experience. And I'm pretty sure that if there's a number in the budget where there's a question about, then somebody on the Board of Finance probably has some background or has some. I know I have notes on most of the numbers, and between the four of us who've been here collectively 16 years, 16 people years, not 16 calendar years, but 16 people years. There's a lot of institutional knowledge that we can provide. So I just urge you to use this as a resource. Is really my whole point.
Sure, and thank you for that. I can access the minutes from previous meetings as well as anyone else, so I know where things live and are housed. Unfortunately, your email came in a little bit untimely. It was after the fact. So,
Yep.
I understand the money was allocated. The town voted on it at the referendum, and that's what we discussed last night. We're just going to go ahead and do the amendment. and incorporate those other options for looking at the repurposing of center school, as it was explained to me by Betsy and Christina, and as it was put in a memorandum dated, I think, November of 2020 or 2021. I don't recall what that memorandum was dated now. But we had our meeting last night. We're going through with the study. We're just going to create an amendment or an addendum, I should say, to make sure the RFP includes the right language for what we're looking at.
Okay, anyone else want to comment on that before we move on?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that that changes the scope of what the, whoever gets the bid is looking at. I mean, we've discussed, and there was an ad hoc committee that was created to look at multiple purposes for the school. But if the intention of that allocation of money was to look at, will it work for a library, then I would have expected us to continue in that vein.
Yeah, and that was made, I thought very clearly last year, that the ad hoc committee had met for over a year, roughly a year anyway. They talked to really every single group in town that could possibly have any use for any space in town. And they found that the two possibly best uses would be library and Parks and Rec, which are both municipal departments. They presented that to the Board of Selectmen. So I think it was very clear at the time that it was a space needs study for, could it work for library, would partially work, and just a part of the buildings, still assuming that hopefully a nice Parks and Rec could go in there too. Yeah, so it's just kind of surprising when all of a sudden people were like surprised that it was for the library. And we know that there's going to be several years where there's so much debt no one can think about really doing anything with it. But some of these projects take many years, and if you're applying for grants or something through the state, sometimes they need to see certain studies. So I think that's what some of the thinking was behind asking for that money and that study.
Nobody was surprised that the grant or that the line items for the library. People were surprised that the RFP for the allocation of the money didn't include what you just mentioned, Mary, which are the other considerations. Is there municipal space? So that was all. I want the RFP to match what the intent of the work will be.
Oh, so that's my point. So again, the intent of the study in March that was approved in March of 21 was for the library. If that changes, that's not the Board of Finance's prerogative. I don't think that's probably your prerogative. But the reason for the change is for a change in scope of the project, not a change in the original intent of the money.
Okay, then it's a change in the scope of the project, because I don't think the townspeople would be very happy if we spent $30,000 now on a study specifically for a library when that wasn't the original idea of the library board, right, Betsy?
No, we can't bring Betsy in. Whoa.
No,
We can't bring Betsy in yet. No.
I'm looking at Betsy because
Thank
she's
you, Glenn.
involved in conversations with me. And then I'm sure you would not disagree with this, that if down the road after center sits vacant for a few years, we go back and we have to spend another $30,000 or more on another study because we didn't look at an all-encompassing approach this time around.
That wasn't the intention to begin with. Do we need to put more money into the study? If we're expanding the scope of it, 30,000 was to look at a library. Maybe it's 45,000 to include other uses, but that's a different RFP entirely.
I think Eileen, can I jump in here? I think last night, because I did watch the meeting and I have been talking with Harry a little bit, is I do think, and Paul as well, I don't think the changes that Tara and Harry are asking for are crazy on the addendum side. And it was part of the original presentation to us at the very beginning about talking about supporting and I think the documents actually were at the Board of Selectmen meeting about supporting the Park and Rec part of it, the library part of it, as well as other uses. I think when we looked at it, the library presented it to us, and we went with the library as the lead of this. And We actually said the library study, and that was our intent. But I think in back of my mind, and I'll be totally honest with you, is it was also going to give us the amendment data that Tara's asking for and Harry's asking for. In my mind, I know that might be not in everybody's mind, and I apologize for that. So I don't think that the changes that Tara and Harry are going to present are that much. And the way they talked about it last night is they were going to put in the RFP, and Checo, or Mr. Checo, was going to put on there that there was a limit of the study to $30,000. And then they were going to get feedback on what could be presented for that $30,000. I think your conversation, Eileen, that you're having is if it comes back to Tara and the Board of Selectmen, and it only encompasses 3 points of the 5 points, we need to maybe address what would cover the 5 points. And is there more money needed, or is it sufficient enough, the 30,000, to cover the addendum? Does that somewhat make sense? Go ahead, Eileen. I mean, you're thinking, I know. Go ahead and say what you want to say. It's an open table, Eileen.
Yeah, no, I just, looking at, a 0% budget increase, is that money going to be allocated if needed? If they come back and say we can't do this study for $30,000, are we going to be willing to give the extra money to meet the goals of what Harry and Tara are asking for last night? And I'm sorry I couldn't watch the meeting. I was otherwise occupied. So I don't know.
My opinion is we let Harry and Tara lead this because it is under their purview, like Dan said. Let them lead this, and I know what we appropriated and under the impressions that we appropriated, but I think we let the Board of Selectmen handle this and come back, and we ask them to keep us in the loop and to work with us and to see if we can come up with a solution that works for everybody. I understand after watching the meeting last night, Tara and Harry's thought process behind it. Also, part of the conversation that brought us to this point, just so we have it all on the table, is the ask in the library's current budget, which we haven't seen, includes the next stage of this. And I think that's what's brought on a lot of this as well, is there's a lot of components that we don't have all the information yet that'll come out later in the budget season that I think that'll make more sense. As always, we want to support the library. We have supported the library, but I do think that this is under Tara and Harry right now to gather it in the way they see fit, and hopefully bring us in and we find a way to work forward on it. I know it's important to everyone on this Board of Finance. I also believe it's important to Tara and Harry. So Tara, if you want to comment.
Yeah, I've said this before, and I hope by now you guys would understand that nobody's denying we need a new library. That is, I would love more than anything for our town to have a new library. But I also know that it was voted down in a referendum not too long ago that the town decided we don't need a new referendum or a new library, pardon me. And in the interim of that, or since then, we now are undergoing this huge new school project and at the cost of $100+ million debt bubble. So, we just have to tread lightly and live within our means. And with all these department budgets being presented here, you're going to soon see that we have significant needs across the town if you're not already aware. So, what are our next steps? And again, if we're looking at repurposing Center School as solely a library, that's probably not the best idea, just because there's facilities there that we could also use toward municipal space. And both Christina and Betsy were the ones who brought those three options in their entirety to my attention.
Okay.
As well as conversations I had with Mary Knox and Tracy along the way.
All right. As far as I'm concerned, I think we've hashed this out as much as we can at this meeting. I mean, closing comments, Dan?
Nope.
Mary?
No,
Brianna?
I'm all good.
All right, let's try to work through this. And I think we can find a way to work through it and make everybody get what they need. So that being said, we can move on. Any other items to come before the board? All right, public comment. Betsy, you can come on board now.
Thank you, Glenn. No comment on this discussion. What I would like to see is if we could get a copy of your presentation on the budget presentation, budget schedule, and the slides, the slide template. I think that would be very useful. I know it's likely to have some modifications to it, but if we can get started now on getting ready for those kind of budget presentations, I think the library and probably all departments would, like to see that sooner rather than later, even if it means making some changes down the line in specifics. I like saying, yes, there are certain pieces of information that every department ought to provide because it organizes things a little better, not only for the departments, but also for the Board of Finance, so that they've got comparable information that they're dealing with. In some ways, I'd also like to see the presentations on the up to the end of 2021 by Marcia. I think those are useful things for boards and commissions to have look at and say, this is what we're looking at for the town's finances. And your budget might impact it this way. So I would like to see, actually, I would like to see those things emailed to me, but that's silly if they could be posted on the town website for people to look at and download as they saw appropriate. I think it would help departments get ready for budget season and hopefully make budget season a little easier on the Board of Finance. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, hearing none. I usually don't make a comment to public comments, but I will in this case. Tara and Marcia, I sprung this presentation on you tonight because obviously we've all been really busy on the templates that we'd like to see. Marcia, I know you've seen it quick. Not that long, but quick enough to see it. If you could go through with Tara, I'm not trying to give you jobs. I know you got 20 hours of jobs a day as it is, but if you could streamline that, maybe pass it out to your departments in a manner that you would tailored it, and maybe Marcia could tailor it where the departments can get to it. I think Betsy's right. If we could get them out as early to these departments, it would help everybody. And as for the other information that Betsy asked for, I think that's a Tara decision with Marcia if they want to post that material. It is public data. It's been presented. That's up to you as well, Tara. So any comments, Tara?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Betsy. Right before Marcia left, we actually were just talking about that. I think it's a great idea. I think, the town, beyond just the departments, which they need to see this as well, but all the boards and committees and the public should definitely be read into what it is we're talking about. And so to that point, the agenda, maybe, how for the Board of Selectmen meeting, we link in just everything that we touch on. When I was looking at the agenda for the Board of Finance last month for the first time and then seeing it again now, it just looks very bare bones. So I don't know if there's a way to beef up the agenda and plug in the additional presentations that are brought up.
So Tara and I talked about 5 o'clock and she was asking about that. I did email Diane Sarasoli and to talk to her about if we could do the Board of Finance agendas like the Board of Selectmen's agendas do, where if we're going to talk, which would require me to get my stuff done a little earlier, if we're going to talk about the budget to actual, that right now that it gets emailed to people, but if you're from the public, you don't get a copy of that. And the difference is that in the Board of Selectmen's, you can go into the agenda, you can say, oh, the budget to actual for revenues, click here, and then you can see it. And so that would provide it to more people and be much more transparent.
So how would you all propose that?
So I've talked to Diane. I think that she probably, different boards do it differently within the town. And I think that she may need some training on how to do it that way, because I think it's a slightly different program that's used. I don't really know, but Ginny does. And we would just get the attachments. I would get the attachments done earlier. Maybe Bob would get his done earlier when he has time to do that, as far as between his meeting and your meetings. And then when she sends out the agenda, that instead of sending all those reports as attachments, that you pull up the agenda and you would just click on the link.
I mean, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do it. I mean, let's be real. If other departments are doing it, just that we don't have access to the posting, and the documents have to come from, we don't produce the documents, like you say, they come to us. So
Correct. It would be Diane and giving her training on how to do that.
Okay, Dan, any comments?
You can do it. Let's do it. Or-
Eileen?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mary?
Yeah, zoning's done it that way for a while, where you just, every single thing coming up, it's a link on the agenda. So there are definitely people in the building who know how to create those kinds of agendas and embed the links. So I'm sure it'd be easy for someone to show her how.
Brianna, you're the last one because this falls under you as well. So, I mean, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I just send the agenda. I usually wait for, to hear from what Ginny sends me. I usually wait to do anything until I hear from that side of it. And then I just send it to Diane. So I do know that a lot of times, we get all the stuff that we're going to talk about after I've posted the agenda. So I guess it just has to be that all those things have to be done before then, before I send it to Diane. Or once I send it to Diane, I guess it has to be done. Because I don't post the agenda, I just send it to Diane.
Okay, so Tara and Marcia, let's work with Diane and let's figure it out and let's try to make it happen for next meeting. How's that?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important, especially for taking these meetings to Zoom solely. Not many members of the public have, well, let me rephrase that. There's members of the public who aren't familiar with Zoom or may not use the internet. So, at least we're going to be housing everything that's discussed in these meetings somewhere to point them to if questioned.
Okay, so let's I'll reach out to Diane and let's see who can help her. Who can she reach out to for this process?
Ginny would probably be the best.
So Diane can reach out to Ginny and we can make this work or try to make it work for next meeting. Okay.
Yeah,
and then just let me know if I have to change anything. I'm happy to do whatever it needs to be done.
It might mean, just because of the timing of the month end and stuff, that the agenda goes out. Sometimes you get the agenda out early. It might mean that we do it, 36 hours in advance instead of 3 days.
Well, I think what is it? Drop dead is 48 hours for a regular and 24 for a special. So I guess we could push it. I don't like to, because then I feel like I'm rushed and I'm going to miss something or screw something up.
Yeah, but
All right. We'll figure it out.
And to your other point, Glenn, about your slide, the format for the departments, thank you for doing that. I think it's a great thing. I'll look it over and with Marcia, and we'll push it out as soon as possible.
Yeah, you could remove some items for this year if you want, if you think it's cumbersome, we could add in an item a year or do something, but that's at your discretion and Marcia's discretion. So, you have author's rights to do what you need to do, but I was just trying to, give guidelines. How's that? All right. And that thing, we've done public comment. Do I have the Mark Mulvaney motion?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Hi,
Aye.
everybody. Have a real nice night. Thank you for your time. Long meeting
Good night.
today. Marcia, thank you for your presentation as well. It was helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.